Nolan's Batman versus the MCU's Iron Man. Who's the better hero? We have two billionaire orphans without any inherent superpowers, both who decided to fight injustice at great personal cost. As with the Batman versus Batman video, we need to establish what is meant by better in this case. Of course, if we're going with a utilitarian approach, then Iron Man is definitely the better hero, since he literally brought back half the universe in comparison with Batman saving a city of 12 million. But given that Batman is a street-level hero, saving his city of Gotham multiple times is quite a remarkable feat. Not everyone is called on to the big leagues, and perhaps in proportion, saving Gotham represents the best outcome in terms of what he's been given. As for Iron Man, you could say that his act of saving half the universe was even more admirable, as it cost him his life, which he readily laid down, while Batman survived to go on living a life of retirement in France. But given what we've seen in the Dark Knight trilogy, it goes without saying that if Batman were called to give his life for the sake of Gotham, he would do it in a heartbeat. So effectively, in terms of their heroism in saving others, we see that both Iron Man and Batman are both willing to pay the ultimate price, namely, the act of laying down their lives for the sake of others. Again, while Batman may have saved lesser people in his mission, it goes without saying that if given the chance, he would also have done it if more people were at stake. Therefore, when comparing their acts of heroism in terms of what they're willing to sacrifice, I'd say it's about a tie for both of them. Next, let's move on to the legacy that they both left behind. With Iron Man, his legacy is most prominently seen in Spider-Man, into shaping him to become the hero he is. There's also his daughter and Pepper as well, but for now it remains unseen. As for Batman, his legacy is tied up in Detective Blake, the supposed Robin hinted to become the next crime fighter for Gotham. In comparison, I'd say that Iron Man's legacy is the better of the two. If some of the good that Spider-Man does can be attributed to Iron Man, then his legacy is better than that of Batman's. With all the criminals from the Dent Act being released, Gotham would need some cleaning up. But involving Blake in that effort may not be the smartest thing, as he is just a regular cop without any special vigilante skills and likely to be killed in action. So for their respective legacies, I'd say Iron Man comes out on top here. Next, we move on to their character as a person. We've already established that they're both self-sacrificial in nature, so let's explore some of their character flaws. With Iron Man, his most apparent flaw is that of his narcissism, a central flaw which branches off into other flaws, such as his pleasure-seeking lifestyle and his objectifying of women. Also, in his self-absorbed state, he remains unaware that he is supplying weapons to enemies of the state and causing civilian casualties overseas. Of course, this was his starting point, and over the course of the series he gradually matured in character. On an emotional level, however, I'd suggest that Tony's biggest flaw was him wanting to kill Bucky in revenge for his parents. I'll go more into this shortly, but first, let's turn our attention to Batman for now. For Bruce, his character is a stark difference compared to Tony's, and by that, I'm referring to the real Bruce Wayne behind the scenes. In the public eye, he acts like a self-absorbed jerk as well, but it's merely a farce to serve as a cover-up. Unlike Tony, who would care about his fame, Bruce doesn't care about his name, and is only obsessed with his mission instead of himself. But just like Tony, Bruce made the mistake of attempting to kill Joe Chill in revenge for his parents. However, Tony's attempt on Bucky was morally worse than that of Bruce's attempt on Joe Chill. Bucky was under the influence of Hydra, something which Steve made sure to highlight in his effort to restrain him. Tony, in his rage, cannot accept this fact and relentlessly seeks to kill. With Joe Chill, on the other hand, he was fully aware of his actions, and therefore, while it's still wrong, it's not as egregious for Bruce to attempt to take vengeance on him. So in terms of their overall character, it seems that Batman has the better track record, whether in terms of personality flaws or their public life. And on a side note, it's worth pointing out that Bruce had a bigger hurdle to overcome in his childhood, being orphaned at a much earlier age than Tony, the experience of which would leave traumatic scars. Next, we move on to their biggest mistakes in their career. With great power comes great potential to misuse that power, and it's not a surprise that some collateral damage may result from their actions. With Iron Man, this one is obvious. His number one mistake by a mile was the creation of Ultron. You could also say that Tony was responsible for influencing Mysterio and the Vulture to some extent. But in those cases, I believe that Tony was justified in the way he acted. For Vulture, alien technology should not be in the hands of civilian contractors. For Mysterio, perhaps firing him from his job wasn't exactly legal, but it doesn't give Mysterio the excuse to artificially create an Avengers-level threat for the sake of fame. A similar line of thought could be said for Aldrich Killian. So effectively, Ultron remains his #1 mistake. Of course, it goes without saying that there wasn't any evil intention on Tony's part in the creation of Ultron. But it was still a decision rooted in narcissism, the fact that Tony chose to withhold such an important decision from the rest of the Avengers, and for meddling in something that was way beyond his comprehension. And on a side note, I'm only counting Tony's actions in this specific universe only, and not on the multiverse as a whole. This is to be fair since we're only comparing with one version of Batman, namely Nolan's version. If we were to take into account the effects of Ultron on the multiverse, then Tony would be open to a lot more blame, as Infinity Ultron was on the brink of wiping out all life across the entire multiverse. Fortunately, in his universe, Ultron was stopped, but not without the collateral damage of the deaths of several casualties. It doesn't just stop there, though, as the ripple effects are seen with the Sokovia Accords, which partially led to the breaking up of the Avengers. As for Batman, there isn't much in terms of an apparent mistake in his crime-fighting career. He did agree with Commissioner Gordon to lie to the city about Harvey Dent, but that was a choice driven by the need to keep the criminals behind bars. Perhaps you could make a case that his mistake was allowing himself to sink into depression and inactivity, which resulted in him being outmatched by Bane in their first fight. Maybe if Batman had won that fight, Gotham would not have gone through its darkest hour. So, in the aspect of their mistakes committed, I'd reckon that Iron Man has the more culpable hand. With all that in mind, when weighing the indicators of their acts of heroism, their legacies, their personality flaws, and their biggest mistakes, I think Nolan's Batman can be said to be the better hero compared to the MCU's Iron Man.